which we will get into. You are tuned into Community Conversations on KLEK 102.5 FM, and we're speaking with Dr. Lillie Pierce from Arkansas State University. She's a professor of media in the College of Liberal Arts and Media. So, like I told her before, we don't want to go through her profile like they have it on the Arkansas State's webpage. We don't want to read it like it's her resume, but I would love for her to tell about some of the other things that she's involved in. She's written a book. She's written several articles that have been peer reviewed. She founded the College of Communications annual televised panel on diversity and multicultural issues in the media. I would love to hear more about that.
Okay, let's start with the oldest thing that I had on that list. When I was at University of Missouri, I helped write a book on science journalism, so that's something I haven't done a lot of since I've been back at Arkansas State. I do consider myself having a minor specialty in science journalism. The name of the book was Social Responsibility and Science News, 4 case studies. And what we did in that book is just looked at how media report about different, I'd say, for lack of a better word, crises in the media. At the time, one of our case studies was the Jack in the Box breakout, where the little boy, I'll never forget his name, he was 2 years old. He died after eating a Jack in the Box hamburger, and I got to interview his grandfather to find out what happened. And then I had to interview a lot of epidemiologists, human epidemiologists, animal epidemiologists, science journalism professors. I had to interview ethicists, and we did this for all four of our case studies. And the book, it was written literally, we finished it 20 years ago. And basically what the book covers is how to report on crises in medicine and in science without alarming the public and giving out false information. For example, to this day, after having participated in that year-long project of writing that book, when I hear about news such as the latest cancer research or the latest research on, the example I like to use is, over the years you hear about oatmeal helps the heart. Then maybe a year later they'll say, well, you don't need oatmeal. And what you learn to do is wait and just weigh out the science and balance it as the studies come out. And then as citizens, we encourage you to try to make the best decision based on the research that comes out. Another good example is with breast cancer and taking mammograms or getting mammograms. Depending on what you read, it may tell you that you need a mammogram every year. Then you'll see another study that says you need one every 5 years. But you as a citizen need to know how to weigh your family health history and make that decision for you. I personally go to doctors who require it every year, and that could have something to do with being over the age of 50. But I don't have breast cancer in my family history. My family, we deal with the heart. So there are certain things I watch for and read. I'm always interested in what I can do to make my heart perform better. And part of that is because of my science journalism training and caring for parents who pretty much died because of internal diseases such as high blood pressure, heart disease. I believe my dad had a pacemaker defibrillator. He just recently passed, and I was there until the end. My mother had a stent, and she had a variety of internal diseases that were complicated because of blood pressure, heart disease, and all of that. After a while, it just takes a toll on you internally. And So that's what happens with that. So I said all that to say that my science journal, I've always been interested in science and medicine, but never had the nerves
Okay.
to work in medicine. But I still read it. I have a health newsletter that I subscribe to now. So, over the years, the closest I've gotten to returning to my work in science journalism is teaching a class called Agricultural Communications. I've taught that twice during the summers. So that's kind of what I do there with my book. And you mentioned that I have peer-reviewed articles. Um, I work with research teams at different universities, and by when we do that, we get a chance to share some of the work that it takes to write a peer-reviewed article. Most recently, there were 5 of us, we finished an article. The lead researcher on that article was Dr. Mia Moody Ramirez at down in Texas, Baylor.
Okay.
So we just published that, and that article dealt with how the Ferguson crisis, or that Michael Brown incident, how it played out in Twitter and in social media. I'm also on a research team with some colleagues at University of Alabama, and we're working on how African American public relations graduates do 5 years after graduation. So that's an ongoing project. We're in the process of publishing 1 article so far, and there are about 4 of us working on that. We had a professor from Texas A&M, University of Alabama, and of course me. I was one of the people. I am one of the people in that article. And then I do get a chance to do a little work by myself. I'll just quickly say that my most recent article was published 3 or 4 years ago, and that's recent for a researcher.
Okay.
And it dealt with how the term angry black woman plays out in print media when you're looking at First Lady Michelle Obama. And so I did that one with my colleague Sandra Combs at Arkansas State University. And so that one it's published as well.
Where can we find that article?
You would ask. Journal of I can get that for you later. Journal of Media and Journal of Research, Gender and Media, something like that. It's an online journal, but if you look up the name of the article is called "The Meaning of Angry Black Woman in Print News of First Lady." In print news coverage of First Lady Michelle Obama. And if that doesn't get it, just send me an email and I'll get that to you.
Okay.
All right.
I would love to read that article. And as a woman of color, I'm sure you have faced many challenges, or several challenges, just maybe in this field. We talked a little bit off air, and I want to ask, we have about 5 minutes or so. Hopefully I can get my question out like I'm thinking. Has this field, media and journalism, has it been male dominated, or has there always been diversity? A good equal distribution of men and women.
Okay. I think what you have to understand, I told you I teach media and history, so before the big move, let's say in the 60s, I believe,
Okay.
before when there was a dominance or a great deal of black-owned media, women were prominent as journalists.
Okay.
If you go back to the great Ida B. Wells Barnett and then Mrs. Daisy Bates, so we've always had women or black women in media. But I think what you see happening now, I mean, there's so much behind it, there's so many things I can say to answer that question. When media became more integrated, so to speak,
Okay.
what you saw happen was, and it's really after those, all those, what do you call them, riots and things in the 1960s, late to 1960s, white media-owned media needed African Americans they didn't feel safe going into places like LA and Watts or whatever. So they would hire blacks to go and work in those and cover those crises. And when those black people came back and provided the white organizations with what they found, then when everything settled down, of course, a lot of African American journalists would cross over and work for white media. So what happened to African American owned media is that the numbers, the people employed there dwindled, which led to a lot of media having to close because people went for better opportunities and they started working for white organizations. So you get to white organizations, and what you'll see happening, and I remember, the reason I remember this is because when I was a graduate student in 1984 through 1985, my research project focused on the American Society of Newspaper Editors and their effort to try to have newsrooms, mainly print newsrooms, look like the American public by the year 2000. And that was a big initiative that they had. So when the year 2000, just to make a long story short, got here, newspaper newsrooms still did not reflect the percentages of minority peoples. It still had not happened. So to answer your question, is it a male dominated? It all depends on what job you're talking about.
Okay.
Is it?
I should say minority versus majority.
Well, in dominant media, if you're talking about that, I would say, I guess I've always looked at it from a racial.
Okay.
I haven't really looked at the gender numbers and specialized in that, but I know racial numbers, it has always been a challenge and a struggle, so to speak, for dominant media to make its newsrooms reflect the percentages and match the percentages of minority people in the United States.
Okay.
Yeah.
In this last minute, what advice could you give to someone that is considering going into this field?
If you want to go into journalism, you need to be well read and well versed. If you're going to go into print media, which is digitized, you need to be well read or be willing to read and be willing to listen to all points of view. Try not to just, even if you have one point of view and you want to stick to it, always be willing to listen to views that are not in line with your views. Also, make sure you are willing to learn how to work with the latest digital technology. You don't have to know everything because things change so much, but just at least be willing to work with it, and because that will help you work in any type of media.
Okay. All righty. Well, I want to thank you for tuning in to part 1 of Community Conversations. We have been speaking with Dr. Lillie Fears from Arkansas State University. She is a professor of media in the College of Liberal Arts and Media. And I can't thank you enough, Dr. Fears, for gracing us with your presence and your experience and knowledge and sharing what you have learned over the
It has been my pleasure to be here.
And I hope
Thank
this
you.
won't be your last time coming here.
Okay, well, thank you.
All right, so stay tuned for part 2 of Community Conversations. We have Dr. Loretta McGregor, also from Arkansas State University. So don't go away. We'll be right back after these announcements.